It's been a heavy metal sort of couple of days, hasn't it, mate?
It has, yeah.
It's impossible to do a full retrospective of heavy metal bands, not in a short YouTube vid. But in general, me and John are going to talk about our favourite bands sort of thing, metal bands, rock bands, and kind of what got us into it. For me personally, getting into rock and metal came in the form of a German industrial kind of rock band called Krupps, and then there was the likes of Beavis and Butthead on MTV, Headbangers Ball, and dabbling in alternative grunge bands and bands like Faith No More, Soundgarden, round about that era sort of thing, for myself anyway. How about you, John? What got you into metal?
To be honest, it was initially in the early 90s when I started listening to
Same here.
Guns N' Roses.
Yeah.
You know, kind of the big metal band. I wasn't really into music at the time because most of it about in the charts was terrible.
It was pop music, wasn't it?
It was terrible, and I just wasn't into it for ages. And then I sort of got into Guns N' Roses, and then after that I got into Iron Maiden in a big way. And then in the late 90s I kind of got into thrash metal, then sort of kept getting into more and more extreme stuff, death metal and grindcore.
Interesting. Have you got any particular favourite bands at the minute, or that you
I'd say
stayed loyal to?
My favourite all-time bands would be Napalm Death, Obituary, Death, and Carcass.
They are heavy, but they're old school as well, aren't they?
They are old school and all pioneering bands.
Yeah, definitely. I respect
I must say also Sepultura. When both Caballero brothers were in the band.
That was going back into, of course it is. I like Priest, I like Maiden, I like Sabbath, but Priest, I got into Priest a bit late in about 2002 when I picked up a compilation album, and the obvious one that probably stands out to me personally from the albums from Priest, Judas Priest, would be Painkiller.
I'd have to agree with you there, John. Painkiller is an absolute classic, and the title track Painkiller is, in my opinion, Priest's best song as well.
Yeah, it's that album never stops, the Painkiller album, and it just takes your face off with all the flying solos. It could shed skin basically. It's classic heavy metal, isn't it?
Yeah, and
heavy.
As I said, I think the title track Painkiller is the pinnacle of that album, which is the pinnacle of Judas Priest as a band as well.
That's an interesting thought as well. I got into Priest through a compilation, and I like the classic stuff and the newer stuff as well, even a little bit with Tim the Ripper Owens when he came on board. And speaking of, we've just been listening to Maiden, haven't we, as well?
Yeah.
And there was Blaze Bayley who took over for a little while, but then the classic ones, of course, from Maiden, the singer, of course.
Bruce Dickinson.
Bruce Dickinson. As I said, metal, probably, or classic metal, as it's been called, pretty much came from the East Midlands, from what I understand. Do you agree with that theory?
Well, the Midlands in general, I mean,
yeah.
Birmingham in particular has always been a hotbed of metal activity. I mean, you've got Sabbath, Priest, Napalm Death.
What about those alternative? Because we got into a time when there was alternative metal bands like, your Alice in Chains, your Soundgardens, your Faith No More sort of thing, which, there was the Pearl Jams and stuff like that. The Seattle bands. That was the time when it was called grunge, and of course Nirvana and stuff like that. Were you a fan of like this so-called grunge era?
To be honest, I was never that much of a massive fan of grunge. However, I did sort of gravitate towards the more metal orientated grunge bands, such as Soundgarden and Alice in Chains in particular.
Yeah. Great bands, great bands. And then as the 90s went on, obviously you got your fast, fresh metal bands like Slayer from the 80s, Anthrax. Who could forget bands like that? Which stemmed from the likes of like Venom, is that right?
Yeah, definitely. From Venom, Motorhead and Iron Maiden.
Oh yes, definitely. Nwamba.
Yes, you were British heavy metal.
That's right. Classic heavy
Which also
metal.
included Saxon and Def Leppard.
That's right. When it comes to bands like Def Leppard as well, you've got like your Kissers as well, your Kiss band. You got your kind of the soft end of heavy metal or rock or age-old rock as it's called. You've got all bands like those as well.
Yeah.
Are you a fan of those? I know you said you like Guns N' Roses.
I like some of the more technically and some of the more technically proficient so-called hair metal bands. A good example would be, say, someone like Def Leppard or Whitesnake.
Yeah, they're the classic AOR bands, aren't they?
Or Van Halen, even.
Oh, Van Halen. Yeah, definitely Van Halen.
Largely because of Van Halen's virtuoso guitar playing,
Yeah.
and also because David Lee Roth is a fantastic singer and frontman.
Yeah, definitely. Very flamboyant, athletic, running around on stage sort of thing. And Van Halen actually did the almost impossible and added keyboards to rock.
Well, yeah, although it could be argued Bon Jovi did the same thing.
Yeah, Bon Jovi, yeah, classic
Because
Bon Jovi.
but they had a keyboards player but no bass player.
Right, I didn't actually know that.
No, that's how
Interesting.
Yeah, interesting.
So, speaking of keyboards, there was the progressive bands as well, and the heavier progressive bands, like for example, the technical stuff like Dream Theater, and they had keyboards or samples in bands like Krupps, for example, like I mentioned, for the industrial stuff, which you never really got into, did you? Like for example, Fear Factory.
However, I do like the industrial grindcore band, the Berserker.
The Berserker. Definitely.
And it could be argued that in fact, some of the most extreme bands, including the Berserker, also someone like Mortician, have a kind of an almost industrial element, using drum machines for studio albums.
Yeah.
But then having to have a live drummer that can play like a drum machine live.
That's very technical, isn't it?
Yeah, not actually easy to play like a drum machine.
No.
Very few drummers can actually do it, and also you tend to have to use triggered drums. A lot of people think using triggered is an easy option. However, it's not, because with triggers everything has to be in time. Otherwise, it starts to sound bad.
Classic rock, eh? It's all classic in my eyes. I like the good stuff.
Oh yeah.
But there's always bands that come along that, I guess for you, the heavier bands that come along that really...
Well, not just the heavier bands. I mean, I think speed comes into it. I mean, I'm a fan of sort of an overall extremity, to be honest.
as well as bands like Slayer.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, a lot was kind of almost pioneered by Venom, Motorhead, and Iron Maiden as sort of metal got sort of heavier and faster, and then basically the thrash metal bands, and then through to your death metals, your grindcores, your black metals, etc., etc.
Definitely. Well, it's been a fun look at us talking about heavy metal, and if you got any favourite heavy metal bands or anything like that, leave them in the comments below. But heavy metal, I think it'll live on for a very long time, if not forever. Take cares. Metal. Heavy metal to the extreme. This is kind of your forte, isn't it?
Yeah, it is really.
Do you want to start us off with how the extreme kind of started?
Well, metal really started with Black Sabbath and Deep Purple in the late 1960s.
That's good.
those two bands were kind of faster and heavier than what had come before them.
Yeah, because you was getting, in that time there was rebelling against the Beatles and the love songs and the hippie power.
Well, yeah.
Care to continue?
Then we kind of move into the early 1970s with a band called Judas Priest, who were faster and heavier still, and
Two guitars.
two guitars, twin lead, and more metal than what had come before them. Then we sort of move into the late 1970s when bands such as Motorhead and Maiden were emerging, and again these two bands were faster and heavier than Judas Priest and all the other bands that had come before them, and they kind of added a punk influence as well.
Any particular punk influence do you think of? It was that time,
just a general punk influence and attitude that sort of made them more extreme than the bands that had come before them.
Really interesting. What came next in your eyes, chronologically?
Then basically along came a band called Venom, a three-piece.
With Motorhead.
Well, yeah. Although really after Motorhead, there was sort of Venom, and Venom kind of pretty much invented pretty much every metal subgenre. You know, they sort of were probably the first thrash metal band. In actual fact, they invented black metal, and they had a heavy influence on death metal as well.
Venom were like a trio, and I guess at this time they was getting the prog rock stuff that was coming along, but that was obviously the flip side to it.
Yeah. Okay, then of course we move into the early 1980s and the emergence of the thrash metal scene, and the early thrash metal bands known as the Big Four: Slayer, Metallica, Anthrax, and Megadeth. Slayer in particular were really pushing the boundaries of speed and heaviness at that time, from their sort of debut album onwards. Then we move into kind of the early death metal bands, who were Death, Autopsy, Obituary, and also Morbid Angel. We'll talk more about Morbid Angel, but also lyrically things got more extreme with bands such as Cannibal Corpse and their gore-influenced lyrics.
Yeah, kind of horror metal, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Somewhat.
Yeah.
With like graphic images on the album covers, on the t-shirts, sort of things, stuff that would make your mother worry.
Yeah, of course, Cannibal Corpse's first 3 or 4 albums are still banned outright in Germany. And they're not allowed to play anything off those albums either live in Germany.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, okay.
Banned.
Then kind of around this time as well, in 1984 a band emerged called Repulsion, who were essentially a death grind band when death had only just really been invented, and before grindcore had actually been invented, and that's how forward thinking Repulsion were. And Repulsion took what was a technique used, arguably a lot of people argue about who invented the blast beat. It was basically invented by jazz drummers such as Tony Williams, and Repulsion took blast beats to a new level, playing at speeds much faster than it had been previously known. And then along came a band called Napalm Death with their 1987 debut Scum, who again took what Repulsion did to a new level, and blast beats to a new level, and in fact they'd coined the term blast beats, and they also invented the subgenre of grindcore. And it all gets kind of confusing after that, but what I'll do is I'll just mention some bands that have pushed the limits of extremity from kind of the 90s onwards.
Yeah.
Okay, and we're talking death metal bands like Mortician, Origin, and kind of a black/death metal band called Merkskog. Okay, also black metal bands such as Mayhem and 1349. And then grindcore bands such as Agoraphobic Nosebleed, The Berserker, and Pig Destroyer. And doom bands like Disembowelment.
That's all good stuff. You know your extreme stuff, don't you? From what you listen to, from your collection and everything. Anything final to add?
In the words of Mortician, stay brutal.
Women in heavy metal. Sounds good to me.
Me too.
Yeah, of course there's women in metal, heavy metal, all kinds of rock, and you've got a big list yourself, haven't you, ready to show
yes.
off. Let me just point out a quick few of the ones that really stand out to me. Girls' School, that worked with Lemmy, didn't they, the late Lemmy, Motorhead, and everything like that, and a Queensryche singer who worked with Queensryche is Pamela Moore. Blonde bombshell, great voice, I think. Can't beat that kind of classic rock kind of sound. There's also the likes of Lita Ford as well. Worked with Ozzy. I think worked with Lemmy as well. She's an axe goddess. And what would you like to add to the list?
It's going to be very random.
That's all right.
I'm going to start with some fairly modern bands. Of course, there's Arch Enemy, who've had 3 vocalists.
Yeah.
2 of them have been female. The first female vocalist, Angela Gosso, and then she was replaced for the last album by Alyssa White Glutes.
She's a younger singer, isn't she?
She is. She which brings me on to the next band, because at one point she was the live vocalist for Nightwish, who also who have basically always had a female vocalist. First they had Tarja Turunen. She was the original female vocalist. They have a male vocalist as well. Then Annette Olsen, who I rated quite highly, and then they had Floor Jansen. Okay.
Cool, good stuff. Just keep reeling them off the list because we want to try and educate people that might not have heard these female vocalists before.
Yeah, Nightwish are kind of operatic gothic metal. I mean, we want to more sort of traditional gothic metal vocalists that I've written down. One of the big ones and one of the most well known, who's been around for years and years, is Christina Scabbia of Lacuna Coil.
Yeah. I think Lacuna Coil did. I think it was Lacuna Coil that did a cover of the Depeche Mode song as well.
I think you're right there, John. I think you're right.
Yeah, I remember seeing like the Golden Gods Awards in 2006 in London.
Yeah, other sort of notable gothic sort of metal female vocalists. Annette van Giersbergen from The Gathering. She's the Dutch band. She's been around. They've been around for a long time. More of a mainstream sort of gothic metal band. Evanescence. Of course, Amy Lee, their vocalist.
Yeah, kind of that new metal era sort of things, weren't
they? Yeah. Also another gothic metal band with a female vocalist, Epica. Simone Simons in the vocalist. Another quite a popular one within Temptation. Their vocalist being Sharon Den Adele.
Also, local Nottingham band actually. There's 2 female players in the band. There's a bass player and a drummer, and that's You Want Fox. Kind of mainstreamish, but rock. They came from the Smears, which were like a trio of females kicking butt basically on the Nottingham scene. Do you know any local female singers that are on the list? If not, just keep reeling them off.
There's Tiggy D from He That Plays Dead. moving on, quite a big band, and she's the main front woman, Lizzie Howe from Howlstorm. Again, another fairly recent band that have blown up quite big recently.
Right.
Liv Christine from Leaves' Eyes, another sort of gothic type metal band.
L7.
Yeah.
L7.
Yeah.
And there was the Courtney Love, weren't they, and stuff like that. They're probably more mainstream kind of grungy type bands.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, just a thought there.
Then of course all the way from Japan, Baby Metal.
Played with Rob Alford as well, they have.
Yeah, they've done they're quite big at the minute, aren't they now?
Yeah, they are quite, maybe not everybody's cup of tea, but they have got a recognition behind them, and they've got a following, haven't they?
Yeah, they've got a following, yeah.
Good point.
Of course they have sort of a main vocalist and then two that sort of scream.
Yeah, in the background sort of thing, and yeah, Japanese they are.
Metal Sue's being the main vocalist.
Right, is that her name?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Right. Didn't White Zombie have a female bass
Yeah,
player?
Sean Usolt.
That's.
Yeah, also from closer to home, Bolt Thrower, quite a heavy death metal band.
Right.
Their bass player's always been Joe Bench, from when they formed in the 80s to when they recently called it a day. And also a fairly underground power metal / melodic death metal band called Area 54, and of course their bass player Laura Salmon.
Cool. Can't beat a bit of bass.
Back onto sort of, I suppose, maybe not new metal type bands, but of that era. Tarry B from My Ruin. Valium from Piston. Quite a, I suppose, not really a traditional metal band, but Sandra Nazik from Guano Apes.
Cool.
Couple of, well, I suppose, metallic hardcore type bands. Firstly, there's Karen Crisis. Again, Crisis, kind of a metallic hardcore, but arguably a thrash metal band as well.
Right.
And last, but no means least, Candace Cuxeline from Walls of Jericho. Quite a well-known metallic hardcore band.
Right. That sounds really good. Yeah, female, say metal. Joan Jett.
Joan Jett, the original.
Yeah, Joan Jett. Who could forget Joan Jett as well? I'll tell you what we do. We'll salute you, women. Keep up the good work. Keep it metal. Keep it rock and roll. Diggity dog. Oh, just steady the phone a second. Oh, John.
Right, John.
I think James Barnes is out there somewhere.
He is.
Son of a bitch.
James Barnes, you son of a bitch.
Yeah, you son of a bitch, James. We love you. See you soon.